Hello.
Boom.
Hey, Fred, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Keith.
Ismail, where's your intro to the book?
To be honest.
Okay, that's a good
But
answer.
tell me, it's much bigger book than I thought. Anyway,
Yeah, it's good. It's not as big as last year's, but it is good. Because only friends are here early, I'm going to test the slide thing, if you don't mind.
okay, go ahead.
Do you
Let's
see
do
my
it.
notes, or do you see the slide only?
I don't think you're not sharing yet, Fred.
Yeah, I know. I don't embarrass me.
Trick
I'll figure
question.
it out on my own.
I see your full desktop.
Okay, so now you see too much, right?
Now I see presenter notes, and now it's just the slide.
Okay, fantastic. Okay,
That's very good.
we're all good. Hey, let's see. Okay, I'm going to go back to not sharing. Sharing is caring, but whatever. So it says recording. That's good. There's a few Eventbrite people who just came in. I don't have time to email them. So what I did on the Google Docs, I just put down the link. Hang on, just changing the layout for you guys here.
I'm rather impressed.
There we go. They had to update Zoom. I don't know if you noticed, but just today. So I hope everything will be fine. We have a new person here. Well, kind of new. Barry, do you want to go video on, or are you too busy in Monument Valley? Oh, you're muted in case.
Hi there. Yeah, I will. I'm actually out and about at the moment. So I was going to go stay on mute for a little bit, but really great to meet you guys. And I was very interested in the product which I obviously downloaded and was using, and it's in a very similar, familiar space. So I'm very keen to hear what everyone has to say, and hopefully I'll get to a quiet space in a minute, so I'll be able to turn the video on.
Yeah, excellent, cool. Hi, Camelot Book Club. How are you? Long time.
Hey, Vint, how are you?
Good to see you. I had trouble getting in. I actually had to have a Zoom account in order to get into this call. That was a little shocking.
Oh, okay. That's yeah. They did an update today, and I was risky enough to actually do the update. It probably wasn't the best thing to update on.
Anyway, I'm glad to see you're wearing a three-piece suit. Thank you for that.
There are two reasons today. Actually, two. You are one reason. The other reason is it's Mufti Day in school today, and Edgar, he wanted to wear a tie, but he didn't like what the other boys might say. So I put on this, and I said, well, look, Dada's going to wear a tie today, and there he went. So your inspirations are in many areas, sartorial as well, Vince.
Well, I have to admit to you, when I joined Google, I thought I would increase the sartorial quotient. I failed miserably.
No comment.
Yeah.
So we're officially starting in 1 minute, but I think it's a bit random who's coming here.
In fact, while I'm speaking,
oh, sorry, I'm going to mute.
I'll nip to.
I'm muting everybody who's not speaking. Okay, I don't know.
We can go and see someone have a coffee.
Sorry, who is speaking? Yeah. It's a bit confusing.
Barry.
Oh, Barry, were you talking on purpose? Don't think he was. Bam, you're muted, Barry. We have, everybody, just so you know, you have to be extra nice to Barry because he is an actual customer of author and reader.
Oh.
So VIP. Oh my gosh, Dave is here today. Dave LeBeau, I expected you because you'll be presenting, hopefully, but Dave Millard, my esteemed advisor as well. Sam, you managed to get here despite your flying around the world.
How are you?
I'm good. It's so cool with these meetings with everybody just popping in.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating. Luke and Connor are connecting.
We ought to have some animation thing where you can literally kind of go poof, and a puff of smoke happens, and then you're there.
I agree with you. This is both kind of sci-fi to have these meetings, but it's also very pedestrian. They should do something.
Well, maybe we should get J.K. Rowling to help us with that. We could use a Harry Potter wand thing or something. Or
No comment.
What about flu powder? There we go. We could use flu powder, and people could arrive from fireplaces.
Oh, wow.
That would be something. I think
Well, you'll just
today. By the way, sorry.
no. I was
Good
going to
heavens,
say
is this the future of neckties, or is it the future of text or ties today?
Ties, Bob. Did you not read the invitation?
No, I guess I didn't. Sorry.
I forgot mine today. No ties today.
Well,
You were supposed to wear a black tie.
Well, I think Panda Marie won when it comes to attire. That's a pretty fancy drawing there. Are you?
But I'm from the bow tie club.
So at 1 minute past the hour, we've got 22 people. So I would suggest we not start, but let's let a few more people come in. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're having the same problem I had, but I unexpectedly was required to log in.
Yeah, I agree with you, Vint. One thing that might be fun is if everybody in the chat just write down where they are.
Oh,
Okay, that's a good idea.
Well, that was quick.
Pretty
Bam,
much.
bam, bam.
This is also a quick reminder since people are to arrive. If you want to grab a cup of water, we're going to be here for around 2 hours.
We will have some breaks, however. I mean, yeah.
So Wimbledon,
Wimbledon. Did I spell that wrong?
Virginia, Chicago, London, Wiltshire, UK, London, Oxford, Alexandria, Egypt. Hooray. Oh, that's Ismail.
Yeah,
Hi, Ismail.
hi there.
I haven't seen you for 16 years, 6 years, 7 years, something like that.
Could it really be that much?
Time
Wow.
flies.
Oh, what is the life?
So for those of you who, as they say, who are just joining us, if you want to, for fun, in the chat, just write down where you are. Westchester County.
Yeah, we could ask, what state are you in? And the answer is confusion.
Let's not hope so. Okay, let's look at the time here. 2 more minutes. Since everyone's just coming in, it's so lovely. Just checking on. Livia just registered, so I expect she will be joining us then. Yes, Chris, but Southampton, that's the boring answer.
I like Chris is surprisingly sober. Very funny.
We have 2 screens of people now.
Disappointingly sober might be the other.
Well, let's see how he feels when this is over. Jonathan Finn, I have to ask you, is that a real background?
Yes. It's actually a mezzanine in my, as in a half floor in my rather taller room. So it looks a bit like infinity, like, but it's actually just quite narrow.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool.
It's nothing magical, but it does look a bit weird on the screen.
Yeah, but that's cool. So today, the way we're going to do this is simple. I will do an introduction in a few minutes, but we'll start with Vint, and then I will say a few things. We'll have some presentations, discussions, and yeah, pretty simple. How we're going to do questions, when we do the presentations, they will be 5 minutes presentations, 5 minutes question and answer. Please write your questions down so we do them at the end of that little bit. Most of them, except for maybe David's, because he had some technical issues, might be live. Are you going to do it live, David? Or Lebo?
oh, yes.
Right, okay. You still have to be within 5 minutes.
All right.
Okay, good.
All right.
Okay, 5 minutes passed, and everybody mute as normal if you're not speaking. And Vint, would you please like to start the day?
Well, thank you so much, Frode, and welcome everyone. I consider it a high honor to have an opportunity to speak first in this yet another Future of Text meeting. This is our 10th one, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's a significant milestone that we're actually all still friends and willing to talk to each other. Look, this is as important a topic as any I can think of, because we are in a period of peculiar transition where a lot of content is being created digitally as opposed to the previous methods, and often stays that way and never makes it into print in the sense of paper or other medium. So the reason that's important is severalfold. Frode, as you know, has worked very hard to invent ways in which we can use computers in order to both produce and consume and interact with and make use of text. But he's also become quite concerned about the ability of a document to know about itself. And the visual meta concept, of course, is one way of implementing this idea. I want to expand on that just a little bit. I spent about 3 hours with Bob Kahn this week talking about the digital object architecture, and I wanted to persuade him that the digital object architecture should incorporate the visual meta concepts that Frode has developed. And I want to expand those to the point where documents, if they wish, can express terms and conditions for their use, and that this is incorporated in the document itself. And it's easily extendable given the way Frode has designed the visual meta system. And the nice part, of course, is that it not only is it machinable, but it's human readable, which means that makes it more preservable, which is the other aspect I wanted to draw your attention to, because the more we create content in this online way, whether it's text or more rich contents like video and audio and so on, or even software and programs, the more we produce in this digital fashion, the more important it is to be able to preserve it in the same way that we've been able to preserve text in other media over long periods of time. And the implication of visual meta is that the documents are in some sense sort of self-contained. If you discover a document, it has a lot of information about itself in it to make it useful. One could go so far as to hope that the document could have enough information in it in such well understood forms that if it's encoded in some complex way, the front end of it, so to speak, it gives you enough clue that you could construct an interpreter that would allow you to understand the rest of the document. The important thing is this notion of self-containedness in the document, which is why the metadata idea in visual meta is important, because it makes the document more self-contained. I think document preservation and document discovery or object discovery is going to be the primary challenge for the future as more and more of this content is created in digital form and stays that way over long periods. So I'm extremely interested to hear what everyone has to say and what thoughts they have about this future that we are in some sense creating together, and hopefully doing it in a way that will be beneficial for everyone. So I'll stop there at my 5-minute mark and turn this back over to Frode and thank him for his persistent organization of the future of text.
Thank you, Vint. Thank you very, very much. I'm now going to turn on to a little screen sharing. And all these windows. See, that's the problem of success. There's so many of you here today that I have problems hiding the the Zoom window. So let me just do that one more time. So you can see the slide only now with Vint's name, not notes or anything. Yeah, good. I can see thumbs up.
Yes,
I
we
have
can see it all.
questions about world. Why mouse cold?
Okay, I don't know if she was expecting an answer to that, but it gives me a chance to share my favorite video of all time. This is called the mother of all demos, and it got that name for a good reason because this was a huge deal. It's 1968, and this guy, Doug Engelbart, is explaining all kinds of newfangled technologies, like, for example, word processing and video conferencing and real-time editing. You got to remember, this is 1968. This is a time when desktop calculators are state of the art.
So that's Doug Engelbart on TikTok. Doug is sorely missed, still our inspiration, and of course today is dedicated to him. So I just want to say thank you for joining us here today in this virtual space. We have high hopes that the 10th anniversaries would be accompanied by much dining and champagne, but maybe being able to stay where we are outweighs any culinary benefits. Hopefully we can meet in person and get to know each other better next year. Today is, of course, as I said, dedicated to my mentor, Doug, who was sorely missed. We're going to have a series of brief presentations followed by discussions, but first I'd like to start the day with a few words. Vint, thank you. I say it often, and even though I'm a person of big words, I cannot say it enough. Your moral support and every kind of support has been transformative. Thank you. Wendy, Les, Dave, thank you for helping me figure out what a PhD is. Maybe a little late since I'm supposed to finish next month, but thank you nevertheless. Ismail, Dave, Pip, thank you for being on the Future Text Initiative. Jacob literally wrote my dreams true by writing the software. The Open Office Hours team, there's many, but to highlight Mark, Peter, Raphael, Alan, Brendan, Jury, Adam. And Raphael, I'd like to single you out for helping me make today rather than a complete and utter mess. Laura and Julia help with the social media. Bruce, Ted, Keith, Valentina, Mark, and my brother Henning. I just want to thank you for your general support in all these ideas. And I'm not going to read all the names to everyone in the book, otherwise we'll be here till tomorrow. Last and most fundamentally, I'd like to thank my parents, Ole and Turid Hegland, and my wife, Emily, and our son, Edgar. Those of you who know me would expect Edgar, so here he is, we can get on with the day. The first 10 years, we have this 10th symposium, which is a bit amazing, but we also have monthly and weekly meetings. Those of you who know about it, let's keep doing it. For the new people in the room, everybody's welcome. The only criteria is that you're a nice person. So far, everyone is, so let's make it a criteria, why not? And that you care about text, that's it. You can come and go as you want. You don't have to be there for all the meetings. We also have the book. I have emailed you all the link to the draft edition, which you can have today. By the way, I can hear someone typing. So if you aren't muted, please do mute yourself. And yeah, we hope to do annual editions, which is very exciting. We are working on visual meta, as Vint so poetically and lovingly described in the introduction, and we built some software to instantiate some of our thoughts. So a little poem. It's the 10th anniversary, so I think I can do that. Text is simple. My 4-year-old son, Edgar, is learning to read and write. It is expected that he will be proficient to an extent of reading basic books by the time he's 5. Although he has, of course, picked up Daddy's iPhone and taking pictures and made the odd wobbly video, it will take him considerably longer to make a video which represents thoughts beyond what he can capture immediately in front of him. Beyond Text is a simple poem of sorts. Text is frozen, yet text is alive with potential. Text can be rendered into many forms. Text is not one thing. Graffiti is text. Code is text. Text does not move at its own speed. It moves at yours. Text is free from much of human color. Text will never replace the voice of a loved one. Text is not trying to be speech. Text was not invented to solve the same communication problems. Text lasts. Images fade. Movies get remade. Books don't get rewritten. Text is timeless, though words are not. The environment text is expressed into, its substrate, is evolving. Text is now active and connected. A TikTok of Doug Engelbart. Text is clearly expandable. Links, emoji, tap back. Text can be mind controlling through propaganda, myths, or social media, or even poetry. Text can be mind expanding. Text is neither true or false. It is simply a conveyor of information. It contains no inherent judgment, no inherent validity. It can only be judged and validated through other text. And today we are figuratively drowning in text, which is instantly click copyable and click shareable. The few clicks are devoted to understanding and evaluation. Text is cheap to author and cheap to read. Someone reads on a modern laptop and uses a modern smartphone. They do not need further tools to write or to produce a broadcast quality video. However, producing a video comes with a much larger amount of external costs, such as locations, talent, effects, music, and so on. The problems text can create can be expensive to deal with. Fake news, climate change denial, social justice pushback, Black lives do matter. My text is not neutral. Text allows for quick, non-linear interaction without having to formulate queries. It's a lot quicker to thumb back in a document to look for something you have a vague idea of, rather than to speak exactly what you're looking for to a human or AI. Text is placeable in space. You can write on a napkin, on sand, or on a computer screen, and put any text anywhere you want to, and it will remain within eyes reach for you to think with, greatly increasing your working memory. Text is referable. When someone puts something in writing, they can be held to account. Text is addressable, which means that it is not just citable, it is trail followable, where an author can clearly state what is referred to for the reader to verify. Text is characterized. My father would seldom say that he disagreed or that someone was wrong. Instead, he would say that he characterized the issue differently. This is what we do when we write glossary terms. We present our personal definition of something. We make no assumption of knowing a universal truth. This is powerful. Text is where we place much of our most important thoughts in laws, records, diary entries, and love letters. Civilization was literally written into existence. Text is simply the most advanced symbolic communication media our species has so far managed to come up with. Text is more, much more than I can list. Text is also largely ignored. This is something we're trying to change with our effort around the Future of Text book and symposium, as well as with the software we are producing to, as Alan Kay puts it, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And the infrastructure we're working on, as I will address later today, but Vint has already beaten me to the punch. We live in a perilous time, but I believe we can write our way out. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you. So to round off the introduction of the day, the next 10 years, that's what today is about. Please write down any thoughts you may have for the next 10 years as the day goes on. This link is in the emails I've sent you. It's also here on the screen. I'll leave it up for a minute. We would love to hear your thoughts on the future of text and the future of text community. For example, we're thinking of producing some sort of a newsletter or even a journal. What do you think? The key question is, how can we more powerfully discuss and develop the future of text? Anyone not have that link? Anyone want me to stay up on this page a few more seconds? No? Good.
I put it on the chat, Fred. Don't worry.
Fantastic. So the schedule for today. We're done with my bit, so now we're going to jump into the presentations, which are 10-minute sessions, including Q&A. Most people have managed to do presentations ahead of time, which is great. We're going to start with Sam. We're going to have 3 presentations, 5-minute break. Then we're going to have 4 presentations, another break. Then we'll start the discussion. I have no idea how we're going to do the discussion. There's so many of you today. I think it's about 34, 35 people. So we'll probably do breakout rooms, but it depends a little bit how the mini discussions after the presentations go. At the very end, we will have a little bit of a closing, trying to go through the document, trying to have something. But just to say it already now, those who would like to, after the official 2 hours, some of us will stay behind and discuss how we're going to run the community through the next year. I see your hand, Vint.
I think we should point out to everyone that the session is being recorded in case people did not notice that.
Yeah, I think, yes, absolutely. The sessions are being recorded. We are being recorded. Everything is recorded. The only negative about that is the breakout rooms are not recorded, only the one with the host. So that is a little bit annoying. So if we do breakout rooms, if somebody could please take notes in that room or maybe record it themselves as you may. And then finally, tomorrow, for those of you who are on funny time zones, we'll have a bit of a follow-up, which is 2 in the morning Pacific, 5 Eastern, 10 here in the UK, 11 Central European, 6 o'clock in Singapore, and 7 in Tokyo. Any questions or any issues before we go into the presentations?
Yes, it's Vint. Are you going to share the poem in text form with us?
Thank you, Vint, for being kind to ask that. It is actually in the introduction of the book now.
Excellent.
So I put it in there. Thank you. So my cursor with these two screens is acting up a bit. But okay, here we go. It should work. We should have Sam come up now.
My name is Sam Winston. I'm a visual artist, and I just want to go through, I guess, a few visual questions. And I wanted to start off with this image, which is basically, I did a project at Oxford University Press, they helped sponsor a project. And this room is where they keep all of the definitions that aren't in the dictionary. Now nowadays it's digital, but when I was having a tour 20 years ago, they showed me this room, which is basically a room where all the words that aren't in the dictionary are kept. And to me, that really beautifully illustrates the idea that language has a shoreline. And I think what we're doing is we're walking along the shoreline. And it also highlights a point about possibly the expansion and contraction of not just language, but how we use language. And I love that they're catalog cards still, or they were catalog cards. So shorelines is a point of inquiry for me that's led me somewhere. And it's an example of my work, and I'm very much into the deconstruction of text and text becoming fluid, usually through more haptic analog ways by breaking down, this is letterpress printed. And this is another deconstruction of the dictionary. And I think, and this is a third sculptural piece, which is made out of the 20-volume Oxford English Dictionary. So it leads to a question, metadata as image. What does metadata, if you were going to draw what metadata as an image, what would metadata be an image? One of the aspects here is I work as an author sometime, and the story reads down this left-hand column. Once there was a time when all the books knew what they're about. There was a book, it was called The Dictionary. And if you read the parallel column, Dictionary, a book that lists words and their meaning. So you read the story down this edge, and then the definitions of the story run parallel to it. And you can see I kind of it's a concrete poem. So there's a lot of play. So you're still following a narrative, but the definitions begin to illustrate what's happening in the story. And that for me is a very simple illustration of metadata, word plus its own definition. But obviously this definition has become an image. So we're turning one type of metadata into visual meta, I guess. And that's it, realized in real life. So the physical manifestation. So so that's an inquiry: is what does metadata look like as an image? And then I would answer always this through a physical form. I think the physical is very underrepresented or misunderstood. As in, now that we're in the digital age, there's an emphasis on screen culture, I think. This is another set of stories where it's a narrative that you read along here, but I was using rule books and different systems of cataloging the line in this story was, what if some rule books held some children's stories to account? And can we zoom in? Yes. So basically here is a narrative that you read, and this is me just taking apart the text from, I think it's Beauty and the Beast. And here we've got all these definitions. And arranging it alphabetically in this image. And are we going to move on? And this is the image that kind of drew Frode's attention. here we've got the word bean, here we've got the word magic, which is from Jack and the Beanstalk, and bean then links to food, which then links to protein, and then magic links to fairy tale, which links to short story, which links to poetry, which links to language. So this is a very primitive and very physical visualization of what I think how we're dealing with hyperlinks at the moment. These are newspaper columns. This is a deconstruction of text. But I think the thing that interests me here is this idea of a mycelium network. Is instead of it being linear, the network beginning to expand. I'm aware that my time is running out. This is a series of drawings about tracking phonic sound, going from legible text to illustration to asemic writing. And this is a wall of language. This is a floor of language. This is a wall and floor of language. This is like metadata taking a three-dimensional aspect. And then the other image I wanted to bring up was Indras Nat, the interconnectedness of all phenomena. When Indra fashioned the world, he made a web, and every knot in that web is tied a pearl, and the pearl reflects every other idea. And for me, language is brilliant for clarity, but it's a bit like fast food. It makes me lazy and addicted to getting it. Deeper thought for me is developed away from words. So drawing is a type of thinking without the literal.
Thank you. Even though that was pre-recorded, I think it's absolutely apt to say thank you. Sam is here, of course, and I'm starting the clock for 5 minutes of questions and comments, etc.
Please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question.
Or just speak. There's so many, it's really hard to, we're all polite people, so just try. Yeah, I first saw David LeBeau, actually, so let's start with him.
David, your mic is muted.
Yeah, whoops, hang on.
Wondering about the connection between the drawing and what neuroscience has to say about learning. And so have you looked in any of that literature, and do you see a connection between what you're doing and what we're learning about the brain?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I would say I guess the slide was taken out, but neuroscience is definitely connected. My relationship to words has always come from being dyslexic, so there's a kind of connection in the fact that to understand language, it's always been a very haptic and tactile experience for me. And I think whenever when I'm working visually with language, it's quite easy for very sort of organic forms to come out just because you're bringing your body in. One of the things Frode just said is we're drowning in text, and then immediately my head is like swimming involves the body. And I also think that just kind of like interventions where, like the mouse, these are all about ways of kind of embodying knowledge, and I think that's where most of my art comes from, is trying to process some of that. And then a lot of the background in the work involves a lot of mindfulness stuff. I've intentionally increased the amount of physical activity that I do in kind of visualizing text and writing with text. I always start with words, but then see where that goes. It's not the best answer to your question, but yeah.
Well, just a quick, so this idea of embodiment in work around making computers think like humans, the singularity idea, seems like what you're doing has some relationship certainly to how do you create machine entities that are more like humans.
Yeah, I think yeah, there's not much I need to think on that, and not much I can. Yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Vint and then Ismail, but please, guys, write down questions, notes for yourself to have later on in the discussion, because so much is going to come out of this. Vint, please.
So there is a funny nuance about what we just saw, and that is the transition point where the words are no longer significant and the image is what is important. And I worry a little bit. I love the images, but I'm more interested in figuring out whether we can hang on to the words and their meanings while we are producing images. And when you cross past that boundary, and now it's mostly an image, and the word part is no longer significant, it kind of loses its curiosity and becomes more or less conventional art. But it is not intended to diminish in any way what we just saw Sam do. But I am curious about that funny transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the opening line, is that it's always going to be a shoreline, and that shoreline is very it seems to be like artificially enforced, as in legible and illegible, and psychologically we approach language very much like that. I can't read that, I can read that. Most of my work, you know, when I do a mass market book, a picture book, we will talk to commissioning editors, and they'll be really, it's quite challenging for them to have a gray zone where you're like, am I supposed to read this, or am I supposed to look at this? And that relationship is an artificial relationship, I would argue. I would say that the relationship between legible and illegible is just, it's not illegible, it's just you're reading a different language.
So we don't have much time in this format. We'll be a bit flexible today, but Ismail, please.
Thank you. I was fascinated by your reference that text is like fast food and so on, because in fact, I like to think that text is what enables us to better appreciate art, because good art critics, in fact, are a bit like a prism. You have a work of art that comes like plain white light, and then the critics are able to show you all the rainbow of colors that are embedded in that work of art by locating it historically, by explaining a relationship, by trying to unravel the package, so to speak, open the ribbons and unravel the package. And as such, the interaction between text and works of art seems to me they're not separate. And I thought, in fact, that presentation reversed my usual conventional view that you would start with the artwork and then add the text of all the editors and critics and so on that would show how much embeddedness and how much more wealth there is in it. Rather, you took the text at the beginning and then you went into what was a work of art that is not readable as letters and words. And I was wondering if you reflected on that kind of reverse relationship between work of art and text.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think the prism is a beautiful metaphor. I would say that it's incredibly powerful. Text is quite powerful. So when we talk about metadata, all we can do, and same with social media, all you can collapse a very sophisticated and nuanced and rich and deeper meaningful experience into just a sentence with a tag, either as a tweet or any piece of metadata, and it can collapse into a very, very kind of like absurd understanding of something. And I think as an exercise for people or humanity, the fact that taking something and unpacking it into a more nuanced form is a really useful exercise. It gets away from the polarities and the extremities that we see kind of occurring with much more condensed, much shorter texts. So yeah, that's one thought. And I think one of the things that happens that we must be aware of is that ambiguity is actually also a gift. As in, sometimes I can say something and maybe it means something else as well. And to get me to collapse it into a tag saying this is what it is can actually take away some of its beauty or take away some of its, how it speaks. So I would maybe perhaps finish on there's text, and then there's the image, and then the thing between all of that is the silence which is held. And I think that's quite important.
Talking of silence, we don't want to be too stressed. So I'm taking an executive decision that after the presentations, we'll do 10-minute dialogue, not 5, because it's going so well. So therefore, if anyone has any objection, we'll talk about it later. But Fabian, please make a comment.
Thanks a lot, Frode. Sam, I love your work. It's super nice how you spark curiosity about the content and put the mind in a playful mode. I'm interested about your working process. Are you using code as well, like generative art or processing JS, something like that, or is it all done as a craft in design?
In a very physical way, I'll always start with writing. Actually, I'll start with an idea, and the idea manifests in language, and then I spend the rest of my time unpacking language. I haven't used code because it almost I guess there's an apprehension there because it adds almost a fourth dimension, which is amazing. I actually will rely on. I realize that most of my work is playing on what the internet and what digital culture is doing to text, but it's then taking that into a piece of paper. It's then taking that into it's then using old world systems to then illustrate. So when I look back at stuff that was coming out when I was doing in 2001, it was just like, oh yeah, you're basically really illustrating data. You're just illustrating data mapping or data viz, but you're doing it with your hands and getting it wrong. And and that's the bit that really, just like you said, playful is really important to me, definitely. But thank you.
So we'll move on to the next presentation. I don't think Jay is here, unless another screen name is being used, but I will play the video and I'm sure we will have points of discussion here as well.
Hi there, I am Dr. Jay Hooper. I am a computer scientist turned web scientist, currently freelancing in Vancouver, Canada, working on user experience type of projects. I have a long-standing interest in text, hypertext and society, possibly because I'm a graduate of the University of Southampton, and that effect happens to many of us there. I'm probably not able to join this symposium live, unfortunately, but I'm very pleased to share this brief recording about Nanogenmo. So without further ado, the roots of Nanogenmo are in NaNoWriMo. That is National Novel Writing Month. It's a community event each November where effectively people come together and make a commitment to each write 50,000 words of fiction during the month of November. And the idea is it's kind of a social support type thing. And what happens is that by setting such a high target of writing 50,000 words in a single month, it hopefully, it hopefully removes the inner editor. And kind of gets you past any writer's block. And 50,000 words is kind of the length of a short novel. So that's what NaNoWriMo is. It's a whole thing. It's been going a long time. You can go check it out if that sparks your interest. Nanogenmo came after and was sparked by a possibly flippant tweet back in 2013 by Darius, who was saying, who wants to join me in Nanogenmo, writing code that will generate a 50,000 word novel. And the rule is that you share at least one novel and the source code. So you can see there's a GitHub URL for this. You see a vast array of different things in Nanogenmo. So everything from poetry generators, mashups of all sorts of different genres of text. A few really lean into the counting element. I think there was one that does the digits of pi to 50,000 words. So there's all sorts of very different interpretations of how this works. I'll just show you a couple of examples from last year. So this one really tickled me. Someone was working with Moby Dick and they used this language model to effectively make it more banal. And you can see that from the words on the screen. You can go check out the URL with this and any other example if you want to look a little deeper. But it's just playing with the expectations and what that text looks like and how it comes over. I really liked this one, Taphos, Death of a Novel. So there was a bunch of text about the death of a novel, the Book of the Dead, preservation spells, and there's this beautiful artifact where the text itself decays. So there's great variety, the point I'm making here. This third and final example is the one that I did last year, which was my first foray into Nanogenmo. I was having feelings about COVID. And I did it was very, very simple. I just made a template of a diary entry over the course of several hundred days, where what would update would be the date, the global count of COVID cases. So I pulled that data, and emotional state. And I basically just wrote out 3 buckets of emotions, where the first was fairly neutral, slightly negative. The second was definitely negative, and the third was kind of frantic. And my goal was to show someone's emotional situation deteriorating through the course of COVID. And yes, I was venting. So just to sum things up, what we have was NaNoWriMo inspired Nanogenmo, which has a whole community now. At the time of me recording this, there are currently 64 issues open on GitHub. And last year, I believe it was 78 issues were opened. I don't know if they were all completed, but as you can see, it's not tiny, given the specialization involved in writing code to generate novels. It's not like a tiny community of 3 or 4 people that we're talking about here. I'm planning to make a submission this year in a very different vein from the COVID diary. So I have access to a data dump of incel comments on the internet, and I'm wondering what happens if we remove the polemic type stuff from that. We shall see. In any case, Nanogenmo is super cool. It's very creative. It's inextricably linked with how we work with and perceive text. So please feel very free to come and check it out. And thank you for your attention.
As Jay said, we will have to talk amongst ourselves. Any specific questions or comments here to put on the record, or should we spend more time on the next questions and comments? By the way, if you do the little hand clicky thing to raise hand, yeah, exactly, Ben. That's great. Yes.
That's right. I can't resist an open microphone. I was just, as I was thinking about generating text, I thought about the GPT-3, and we have something here at Google called Tina. And I've been rather astonished at the ability to generate, through sheer statistics, texts that make sense in the sense that they're reasonably grammatical. They have some coherence from the semantic point of view. How do people feel about that, and is that relevant to this idea of generating 50,000 words? Because a lot of these systems have been designed to do completions, and so you can imagine writing the beginning of a paragraph and letting it figure out what the rest of it is, and then doing that, repeatedly, wash, rinse, and repeat. I have no idea what would happen, but how do people feel about that method of generating text?
Good rhetorical question for now while we think about that. Peter?
Oh, I'm doing a PhD project on it, so I'll report my results soon.
Okay. Do you want to comment a little bit further now, actually, since it's right on Vint's point?
Sure. What I was going to highlight before that was that also Nanogenmo has a very strong collaborative aspect to it, where it's not just machines generating the text, it's humans working with machines and humans working with each other, and the output of machine to craft and create or cobble together, if you like, whatever you feel like to create the text. As far as to answer that question, if I understood correctly, how is it that people feel about reading this sort of almost gibberish text, which is something that I've noted in a survey I did. A lot of people, how a lot of people described some generated text. How do you, read this strange output? How do you process it? As far as tastes go, as far as being able to actually read and understand it. That's something that I'm literally doing data analysis on right now, to be followed by interviews. So far, it seems that so previous studies have shown that people feel quite polarized about this. Some people are like, yeah, generated text is weird, but I kind of like it, it's interesting. And other people will say, you know what, it's crap, I don't want it, no thanks. Which is fine. I think just to close that up, whether we like it or not, computer generated text, as we know, has been in existence in our world, in newspapers and such, and online on our phones and weather reports forever, and it's already snuck in. And I guess the question isn't, are we into it or not, but how much more of it will we accept, I suppose. Not sure if that exactly answered your question, Vint, but yeah.
If I could just quickly jump in. Yes, it does. But it occurs to me that if we think of GPT-3 or Tina and these other text generators as instruments, and we're learning to play them, when you interact with them, you can lead it and let it fill in the blanks, but you can lead it through a story by injecting new material. It's actually a fascinating process, and I'm beginning to wonder whether these generators will become tools as opposed to curiosities at some point, as people discover how to manage their production, their text production.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of companies trying to turn them into usable tools for creative writers and other writers. One thing that I do think is not highlighted enough, that even based on playing around with it a bit, even if you do try to direct the machine in a specific direction, you will still get things thrown up which you weren't expecting, which might be good, but sometimes actually really isn't good, as is in the case of AI Dungeon, which I read in an article has been used a lot for creating, shall we say, erotic stories for people to enjoy. But the problem is that the model trains on other users' input as well. And so other users can get kicked up, shall we say, results that they weren't expecting or weren't wanting, which, is not always very good. So, yeah. Watch the space. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, good point. Peter.
Yes, I wanted to say that it might be interesting to have a Nanogenmo take a month and try to create some sort of a tool or application of visual meta. And just more generally than that, just like a nano authoring tool to come up with, after a month, some sort of software tool to help authors either in nonfiction writing or in fiction writing.
Yeah, the whole idea of it becoming a tool, not just a literal tool like a knife, but more advanced, is interesting. Brandel, you're new here. Please tell me first how to pronounce your name.
That will certainly do. Brandel is the way that I tend to go. It's made up, but it is my real name.
Okay.
I actually did that. I wrote a few years ago some NaNoWriMo writers, things that are sort of mini tools, explorations, experimentations of things that might help with the sort of working on the prompt or generating more ideas and more text. Something that I was surprised by in this presentation and in some of these discussions was the proposition that people would actually read Nanogenmo texts. And I'm curious if anybody actually does, or if the purpose of them is merely to exist.
Sorry, I was typing a reply in the chat there. But the question was for everyone, right?
Okay, yes.
Ismail, and then after you, we'll go back to the presentations. But please, Ismail, absolutely.
Yeah, my initial reaction is that the very existence of the exercise is what is being celebrated, so to speak, and the value of the exercise is for the person who does it. I doubt very much. I certainly would not spend time reading 50,000 words that were generated in this fashion. There's so many interesting things to still read in the world and learn from and value and develop the mirrors in which we see ourselves and the windows through which we see the world by interacting with the processes of thinking of different people from different cultures around the world. I guess I would tend towards the people who said that spirit is gibberish or something like that. It's maybe valuable as an exercise for the people who did it, but I'm not sure that it would have much, and certainly I personally would not invest in reading 50,000 words that were generated that way.
Comment, Frodo?
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, so in forecasting the future, you have this idea of possible futures. And one of the main dependencies here is the capability of machines to achieve a kind of reading comprehension ability that's comparable to human reading comprehension. Well, if we achieve that goal, then the generation of machine text takes on a whole different meaning. So we're talking about machine-generated text today, which is largely gibberish or of modest value. But as different technologies kick in, the whole landscape is going to change dramatically. That's the future of text if you forecast forward.
A future of text. I said we were done, but I see Mark wasn't said anything. Please come in with a comment. I mean,
very quickly, not so much machine-created text, but text-created machines. As a programmer, we're playing around with GitHub Copilot, which is an AI extension to Visual Studio Code, which basically helps predict when you start writing some code, some predicted AI, sticks some more code and kind of tries to help you finish your line or your block of code. So this is kind of an interesting interactive thing, which maybe many programmers aren't aware of. I'll post the link in the chat. Thanks.
And thank you, Mark, for highlighting the chat. So this is, of course, a symposium on the future of text. So the text you put in the chat will go in the comment section on YouTube on the recording of this, but also it will go in the book. So please feel free to use the chat properly. It's not just going to disappear into the ether. We'll also try to have at least a machine transcribed text of our speaking together here, but that tends to be messy. So whatever you put in the chat is good. I'm now going to go back to doing the screen share, and we're going to go to napkin.
Bro, the video, I don't think it's playing.
I think we lost Frodo. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying sending him a message, see if something happened.
His machine has taken over. The revenge of the programmers. There he is. Oh, but he's frozen. I can see him in the last page on my display, muted and no video, which means that the system is not detecting him, and it will eventually decide that he's disconnected.
Yeah, while he gets back, we can maybe continue some of the.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe we can do a workaround if I just post the link to the video to the chat and everybody watches it on their own machine.
Yeah, that would work, Fabian.
Was there a problem with the video?
Yes.
Yeah, you disappeared for us. We didn't see either video or audio or hear audio.
Oh, really? Okay. That's really bizarre. I had to let the family in with the door, so I apologize for my sneaking away. But okay, I'll try doing a screen share again. Let's do it this way. And you can see Fabian there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
So let's see how it goes this time.
Hey, I'm Fabian. With David, I'm building Napkin. And before we start, I have to say it's thrilling to be here. It's looking forward to the discussion so much. The calls on the future of text are always an inspiration for what we are trying to build here. And what we are trying to do is when we read books, like David and me, we read a lot of books. We always enjoy to dive in those wells of wisdom and inspiration and to follow the ideas in the sequence like the author has laid them out for us. But when we think about how reading actually works, and especially what we do after reading, is we often take notes. And honestly, we don't look at those notes so many times again, because it's hard to connect notes from different books. If I read a lot of books on a lot of different topics from different areas, at some point, I don't know how to structure my notebooks anymore. And therefore, we thought about, can we change that? Can we build something that improves on this situation? And what we dream of is to breathe life into all texts that we think are inspiring. And by breathing life into them, we mean take out the key insights, keep their source link to where they come from, make all those key insights kind of fly up and build a swarm of those key insights. And those swarms should evolve, they should emerge, they should connect with other swarms from other sources, and therefore allow us to always add new thoughts to those swarms and save thoughts from other swarms and build a personal swarm of thoughts. And the future we dream of, having this swarm for every person, would be a future where thinking becomes way easier, because thinking is actually making those new connections and keeping those thoughts that we think are important for our lives in focus. So we just saw the book Noise by Danny Kahneman, and we already built a swarm of thoughts from that book. So imagine Danny Kahneman in the future would also send you a link and say, hey, of course you're like buying my book, but here's also a different structure of how you can explore the thoughts. When you press start, you're asked, okay, what you're interested in. Let's say anything on the mind, and then you already see the swarm of thoughts go into formation, and you can see that the thoughts are arranged based on their content. So if I'm interested in that one, in the background, I already see an arrangement of the other thoughts, and I can say I'm also maybe interested over here, and it always shows me new connected thoughts to what I currently want to look at. Maybe my beliefs are something I think is important. I can also save thoughts from here. Now my napkin tells me I can fly somewhere else because I've already read everything on beliefs today. That's right. So let's go somewhere else. And there we already see it's not only notes on noise. Let's close the public napkin here. Let's go in my private account. In my private account, I have a lot of different thoughts from different sources as well. For example, Derek Sivers reads a lot as well, and he has book notes. We put them into napkin as well. And of course, I can't only browse and save thoughts from other people. I can also add my own thoughts. For example, this might be something that's interesting for me. I'd say it's related to mind, future. I think I have stuff on future as well. And when I add the thought, I already see it connects me to the existing knowledge I have. When I click it again, I see more thoughts. And when I want to share my own network of thoughts, I can also make it public to share it, for example, with you later in the discussion we want to have on Napkin. What we are especially interested in is, do you think taking existing texts and breathing life into them in the sense of building those organic living networks that also use NLP to do some thinking on their own, to suggest new topics automatically, to connect topics automatically, might be something that will lead to a world where more people can more easily keep the thoughts that they think are relevant for their life in focus, and maybe even more easily see inspiring new connections in their thoughts. If you have any opinion on that or any other opinion on the whole napkin endeavor, please come to the session later. I'm looking forward to that. See you.
Question? May I ask a question, please? Clarification question?
Yes. But next time, please do the handy thing, please, Ismail.
Which? Oh, the hand thing. Okay.
Yeah, don't worry.
Well, I have a question. Do these things that you do on the napkin and emerge from the machine itself, selecting things that are related to a word or to a theme, or do they come only have invested in reading the whole book first, and then these things are reminders like notes that are being added by the machine in addition to your own notes, or is this being done by the machine? And the reason I'm asking this is because I believe that we have a very serious problem. In fact, I'm thinking of my grandchildren right now. They, finding things on the net, sentences, these little snippets, is nowhere near enough to handle the depth and complexity of society as it evolves today. So I wanted to know how much you put in before you start taking out, or the machine starts giving you more, or does the machine start giving you more from even works that you haven't started with?
Thanks for the question. Like short snippets and book summaries can never replace books. And the time you spend reading a book is also time thinking. And when you read a book, nevertheless, at least for me, it's hard to connect it with thoughts from other books. So everything that I have in my personal napkin is stuff I put in there myself. While reading a book or after reading a book, I add the notes, I add the topics, and then when I read another book, I see connections to thoughts I already had. And also on top, we are playing with NLP to help your thinking in the sense of seeing connections to thoughts that you didn't see the connection yourself.
I just wanted to say hi. Everyone say hi to Edgar. Hi. Everyone's waving at you. That's nice. Okay, yes, Raphael, please.
Yeah, mine is just a simple question, but I think Fabian answered half of it with his comment. So the thoughts you add to Napkin, they're all manually added from what I understood. But will there be probably a possibility of importing my highlights and notes from different apps like Kindle or Apple Books and the such? Because that way, that's half of the work. And then I can just organize those thoughts and sentences where I see fit.
Already today, when you have an iPhone, you can send in text that you read, for example, in your Kindle app with an extension. In future, we'll also have some connections. At the moment, David and me are building this because we believe in the idea of making thinking easier for everyone. So it's not many developers by now. You can also share your thoughts. So what some people do is they share their account with others so they can save thoughts that you created in their own account. It's relevant for some podcast creators or some writers as well that want to share their thoughts in a network.
Background noise is very disturbing. Please mute your self.
Indeed. Even if you are the presenter, if you have some notes, if you can, just for those moments. Mr. Bernstein.
Hi, very interesting system. What are you doing for conceptual clustering? And are you doing this in a hyperbolic space or a Cartesian space?
Currently, contextual clustering is mostly done by the people manually themselves when they associate the tags with the content. What we are using to automatically associate tags with the content is neither of both spaces. As far as I understand it, we are using a pre-trained NLP model that creates an n-dimensional space, and in that n-dimensional space positions both the thoughts and the tags, and then just looks for a kind of Cartesian closeness between the thought and the tag, and therefore associates them with each other. But if you have any ideas on how to improve that and make it even more inspiring to see surprising connections, which is the most exciting thing, we're happy to discuss.
So we're seeing a 2 or 2.5 dimensional projection of sentence embeddings?
No, the sentence embeddings are in n-dimensional space. The pre-trained model that we use is not 2 or 2.5 dimensional, but it has I don't know the precise number. If I would have to guess, maybe 128 or something like that dimensions in the end.
I saw a comment, a few comments in the chat about the design, the visual design. It is very beautiful. There's no question about that, but the text seems very small. Can you tell me the size monitor you're using and just what the user experience is for you as a developer?
Yeah, that's kind of a trick we always do when we do screen videos, because people perceive the general aesthetics as appealing, and that is important because we also want to put the mind in a state of flow, in a state of joy and beauty. But when we do screen videos where you can actually read the text, you can't listen to what we are saying. So if it's only 5 minutes, we always zoom out a little bit. If you look at it in your own screen, it's the font that you are adjusted in your browser, like the font you're used to. You can zoom in, zoom out, it adjusts to your zoom rate.
That's a fair addressing of that one. I know there are many graph and visual people here. Any further questions, or should we keep moving a little bit? We have a 5-minute scheduled break now. Any questions or comments before the break?
Brendel's hand is still up.
Oh, yes, I see that. Also,
Dean
Dini has a
well.
physical hand. So Dini after Brendel.
I'm curious very interesting to think about the actual physical real estate, the real space, and I think it's very apt to ask about the actual monitor that you expect to use it on. What would you do with more space, as in like a lot more space? Do you have thoughts of how you would use things like the really big Microsoft Surfaces or a cave environments that give you arbitrary sort of range for this kind of thing?
It's a beautiful question because it goes right in the core. We think first, something before I answer the question, collecting thoughts should happen easily on a mobile screen. Like collecting thoughts in your daily life, just typing something into your napkin, adding it to that ever-growing, evolving swarm of thoughts should happen easily. But when you look at it, we either see people using a tablet, smallest size, big screen, like a big computer screen, and the bigger your screen gets, the more thoughts are displayed. So you see thoughts that are readable, and you see those archipelagos, those islands, those tiny swarms floating around the thoughts that you are looking at. And yeah, just the bigger the screen gets, the more thoughts you see, and then you can like tap any that you're interested in, walk in front of it. I dream of doing it on the biggest screen that we can get.
Luke?
Oh, hi. We develop an app called Hook that allows users to link arbitrary resources together, notes, ebooks, PDFs, whatever. And one of the frequently asked requests is basically to have a visualization tool for that. So basically people seem to want that. I've resisted because A, my team is small, and B, it's not my area of expertise. But maybe we can connect about that, or anybody who's interested in visualization. So we would make available on our side, that we make the data available in a format that's useful. We've had some suggestions, but then you'd be able to suggest what format would be useful for visualization folks. So I would personally love to connect with visualization experts for that, regarding that.
Luke,
your topic sounds thrilling.
Could you put your contact details into the chat regarding this? Sorry.
Sure. Yes, I will do that right now.
Also, I very rudely said I'd go to Dini, but then I forgot. Guys, please remember to do the clicky hand, because then you're at the top left of my screen. There's so many of you. You're on 2 screens. So Dini, are you hearing me? Are you able to come in now? Or, okay, I'll try to raise you later. And I think, Bob, you wanted to say something, Bob Horn.
Yes, I just wanted to offer any help I can with the visualization. I've done a great deal, as some people know. Wrote a book called Visual Language, and a whole chapter on, and quite a bit of research on visual diagrams of all kinds. And you'll hear more coming up.
I think I even read that. I didn't know it's you. Wow. When I was starting data visualization 10 years ago, I think, wow. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an old book.
That's very thrilling.
I wouldn't change a word of it.
No, you shouldn't. Thank you.
We got it right. that time.
Wow, it's perfect.
Good, good. Okay, so we have scheduled 5-minute break. I guess we can, since we are virtual, maybe we don't actually need that. I don't know. Shall we just continue? Since, sorry, the timer for that discussion just ran out. Okay, we will keep going. If anyone needs to run to have tea or anything, I guess we can do that. That's the technology. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing. This time, I hope the video will play. So that's our 5-second break. Actually, for a point of order, did you hear Bob there? You did? Okay. No? I'm getting all kinds of shaking. Okay. I'm just wondering how this Zoom thing works. Okay, let's do it again. Apologies.
Hello, I'm Bob Horn, and this presentation is about diagrams. This all got started since I've been working with a lot with visualization and text, and somebody sent me this quote. I will just quickly summarize the quote. It says basically, the author says, I would rather have you not read the text of the book that I've just written, but only look at all the diagrams and you'll learn what you need. The author says, for a 600-page book that he has written, don't read the text, which is kind of an interesting thing. It really means don't read part of the text because, as I've already said, I regard the diagrams, or what he calls graphics, as one kind of text. What was the book? It's a big book, 644 pages. When I looked at it, it had 538 diagrams and 62 tables. And I thought to myself, really, is that what people do in medical school? So I've been at Stanford for the last 27 years, and I went over and talked to some medical students, and they said, well, yeah, we never read the texts. And every quarter, we get 5 or 6 of those great big books, and we look at the graphics, we look at the text. And then if we have to understand it a little bit better, we look at the writing around the text. Now, you may wonder, what does these diagrams look like? Well, you'll note that the text actually in these diagrams, it's one of the ways that diagrams are done, is separated considerably from the text. And I will say that that's not the best way to make diagrams, but one of the better ways, I think, to arrange text is this, that is to put the text or the words in a diagram close to the visual elements. The question for this talk then becomes, is massive use of diagramming part, not all, of the future of text? And I think so. I think we're doing that because it's a quicker and faster way to use a good bit of written text when it's quite systematic. It also enables learners and people who've forgotten and are relearning to scan and skip. I say that we have to scan and skip an awful lot more in the modern world because we're creating more and more knowledge. And so we need to devise methods like better diagramming to accommodate our needs. This is all part of a larger project. How do we improve our thinking about the world around us? And I think to do that, we have to improve our mental models and the ways they interact with each other. And the way we do that in very complicated situations is with diagrams. For me, the next step is a massive integrated set of diagrams and then the development of a better theory about diagrams and how to use them. My proposal is that we launch a metadiagramming project to diagram several complete subject matters. In other words, we need a 1 million integrated diagram project for that. And with the kind of computational capabilities that we now have, it can be supported, although it will require both people who are very good at the creation of diagrams and know the research, the recent research on how to make diagrams better, as well as the subjects that are being put together. And then we should here's my typo, and we can hyperlink the diagrams, which will be a very interesting research project in itself, and may very well eliminate a number of kinds of gaps and other kinds of opportunities in such a project. There are many benefits, and I've already described some of them. The next thing that we need are leaders for such a project. I don't think a million diagram project necessarily has one leader. And I'm certainly willing to help out with such a project. And of course, we need to look for what kinds of organization would fund it, sponsor it, put it all together. And of course, you'll say, you've just given a 5-minute talk on diagrams and haven't shown us any diagrams of what you're talking about. Well, I have created one for the 1 million standalone diagram project. It's in the volume 2 of The Future of Text. And of course, I'd be happy to send you it as well.
Oh, that was
I take it that means you finished.
Yes, I had to edit that video with Bob's help, so I didn't edit it and end it in the best way. Vint, I see your yellow hand.
Well, wow, is that an insult? No, I guess it's a literal expression. No, so I held this up earlier, and I'm not sure how many people can see images because there are 5 pages worth of imagery, but I'm holding up a 1,342-page book called The Molecular Biology of the Cell. And it is filled with diagrams, one of which in the middle looks a little bit like what Bob was saying. It's diagrams and text together on the page. And it is essential to understanding this book because the diagrams create a kind of abstraction for you. You may still need the text to understand the meaning of the diagram, but the abstraction helps you organize the text in some sense and when and how you absorb it. So I'm actually quite a big fan. I don't know if I'd go quite so far as Bob to throw away all the text or something, but I really believe that diagrams can be super helpful. Some people think very visually. I'm one of them. Other people don't. I mean, other people need text. Other people need what do you call serial rendering of the text by having it read to them. If they're dyslexic, the audio channel is better than the visual channel. But I think it's a powerful notion.
I agree with you, Vint, and I'm not. I think you've extended my remarks a little bit beyond where I would go, in the sense that I'm not recommending that you don't read the text. That was Stahl. I think that there are different ways that different people absorb material. I just think that for us in the modern world to be able to diagram really well huge subject matters will give us an awful lot of interest things about epistemology and also about just practical experience of dealing with the world where we still only have 24 hours a day.
So there's something that Engelbart did that I want to tie together with this as closely as I can. What Engelbart did with the text is to say, when you write the text, please organize it in such a way, for example, that the first sentence of this paragraph contains the core of the paragraph, or this paragraph contains the core of the chapter. That's an abstraction technique. Graphs and charts are abstractions, and you're doing visually what Engelbart said we should do with words.
Yes, and I think that it's been shown very carefully that there are different structures of information that many people can benefit from. For example, argumentation mapping. Great deal of what we deal with is dispute. And Stephen Toulmin came up with a method of doing of showing those kinds of disputes in a visual way. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, there's a few, but just to throw one thing in here, I'm sure most of you remember Doug's 68 demo. The thing that I most often refer to back there is that shopping list of going home. So he drew a little map on the screen and put the different items, but they were instantly then clickable to open up more. So what you're talking about here, having these diagrams linked, of course, we could use something like image maps, and we could probably store it in the EXIF or something like that. But I think it is really important what you're highlighting, because certain kinds of information, of course, is more amenable to this than other kinds of information. But the authoring tools we have today are utterly lacking. When we had Go Live back in the day, you could do some of this. You could draw on an image, put a link, boom, there it is. Can't do that. So I think that what David and Fabian are doing is really important. It doesn't do the same thing at all, but it helps increase the literacy that, yes, information can be more visually presented. And on my side, I think the interactivity is so hugely important. Lay it out once, but allow people to completely mess about with it. Luke, then Ismail.
I mentioned Aaron Sloman earlier in the chat, and I'm going to mention him again. I've basically, I guess there's a question I'm asking and also a suggestion. The question is whether visualization folks have heard of Aaron Sloman, the British Aaron Sloman, and whether they're using their work, and if not, it would be a recommendation. He was actually my PhD thesis advisor in CogSci AI at Sussex in Birmingham, 90 to 94, and I'll drop a few references in the chat. But he's perhaps the first AI researcher to deeply look into classical AI, look into the brain's visualization capabilities. In contrast to what was the original trend, of course, was Phrygian representations or declarative representations. And this PhD thesis was on that. And then he came back to this in 2012 when he was invited to write a paper for the Turing Centennial. And he's got the kind of bold conjecture that, well, that Turing died young. His last paper was actually on morphogenesis, and he looked at chemical processes and spatial stuff, essentially. And Sloman's conjecture is that was the direction which Turing was heading, because it was obvious. Because Turing said something interesting about, just in passing, I don't know if it was a thesis or a paper, where he mentioned that computers can do oh my god, I don't have the literal words here, but basically can reason, but they can't have insight. And Sloman's thinking that Turing was getting into this fundamental idea that the computers weren't on the track with Phrygian, essentially Phrygian representations to basically map, to really deeply understand and replicate human thinking. Something more chemical has to happen. So Sloman's basically launched a metamorphogenesis project, which aims to understand how we understand things in visual terms. So earlier I said I'm not a graphing expert, but I'm actually personally deeply interested in this visual spatial stuff, which I think traditional graphs are not. It's not about graphs. There's other ways of representing information, geometric ways. So I'm just throwing that out there, and I will mute myself and share the references in a moment.
Thank you, Frode. I just want to say that there is a whole category of speech that is indeed imparting information that is susceptible to being mapped and presented in diagrams and so on. But a lot of what we deal with as humans and in society, in fact, requires text to talk about things that are almost impossible to visualize or to graph in any way. I mean, you talk about things like empathy, like insight, like identity, like, I mean, these, if you try to summarize them by saying these different things create the identity of so on, you are by definition excluding much of the nuance and the complexity and the affinities that you're trying to reach between the writer and reader of the text. So I would just, I think there are many types of text that are susceptible to being summarized graphically, but I think that there is a significant part of our language has been invented, in fact, to deal with things that we cannot even visualize in any way. And we wouldn't want to lose these as being insignificant or irrelevant.
It would be fantastic to have.
I certainly would not, am not advocating eliminating any of those. I appreciate certainly the empathy and identity issues. It's just been my lifetime work most of the time to be involved with international task forces and government projects and business places that have to deal with real complex issues of the world. And for example, the mural in the on the wall behind me is an information excuse me, an information mural of nuclear waste disposal. And it covers 1 million years because we have to think about 1 million years and all the complexity of not only geology and chemistry, but also the social and political and economic situations, and how you put all that together is a problem. That's the only thing I'm really advocating for the diagrams. I certainly am not suggesting at all that that diagrams take over poetry and novels and ordinary discourse around the table.
It would be fun though if we did pretend that you guys did disagree and have some kind of a smackdown session where you would fight your corners just to see what would happen. Even though I know you both well, and I know you both completely understand that it's about how the different visualizations, whether a column or spread out, can work. I just so there is a comment here in the comments from John Hockenberry. Says text already excludes empathy, which grows out of effective interaction and face-to-face conversation. John, have you not read a good novel lately? Have you not felt for the character more than somebody you might be standing next to at a bus stop? That's a strange comment coming from you because you're such a great writer. So I don't feel bad calling you out, but I'm giving.
I think it's no. Please call me out. It's comparative though. I think novels have all of that, and you're absolutely right to point it out. But I think that especially in the anxiety associated with screen-based communications, there's an increased consciousness of the ways in which losing those affective channels denies a conveyance of empathy, particularly at a time in political speech where there is so little face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. I see a good couple of hands, but I'm going to give it to Daniel Norman because you're Mr. New.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I have 2 questions that I don't know if they're practical to answer, but I want to put them out there. I'm curious, number one, I'm curious as to the group's perspective on the boundary between what is considered text and just other symbolic gestalts in general. Notwithstanding the particulars of Unicode, it seems like somewhat of an arbitrary distinction to me, especially in a context of various kinds of visualizations being mixed with text. The second pertains to representation of text and other symbolics using graphs and some of the interesting possibilities with that. Thank you.
I'm going to give the word over to Sam, but on comment on what you're saying, Daniel, the reason I started the future of text is the answer is yes. Right? If we don't investigate pencil on paper poetry of the future and also diagrams and all that stuff, I think we're in deep, serious trouble. The one thing that I don't like is those silly arguments about, oh, VR will be better.
Yeah.
Right? It's just so lazy. VR can add a lot. Of course it can. Putting text on the wall, like a murder wall, like Chris Guttridge calls it, can be very useful in some context. But what I'm really trying to foster a community here, where we really, in fun ways, fight these things out. And the people in this community are so warm. I think we should be very honest and push in all kinds of directions. And so I think it's very appropriate that Sam may want to have the next comment.
It's just a brief comment, but responding to Bob's invitation to make this, this large. I think the thing that strikes me is what is the page in which that is drawn on? As in, obviously, I'm speaking metaphorically here, or am I? Is it the page that is drawn on? Is it the book? As in, if you've got the codex and it's 500 pages long, then that defines it. And then if it's the tablet, if it's the screen. And I think one of the things that is really hard to get our heads around is basically the space in which everything is existing in, which automatically decides how you navigate a multi-diagrammatic universe. As in, I think the hyperlink is most probably the best we've got at the moment, or is it? But I think it's incredibly, it's quite hard to get your head around. If we took that away, how could we do that? How could you navigate between multiple graphs and multiple spaces? Where's the silence in it? And then that will define how big a thing you can map, how big that can be.
Well, I work on the computer very often, and or I would say most of the time. And then we have several choices for these very large information murals. We can print them out on 5-foot paper, and the mural behind me is a smaller version of the large one, which is on the wall in the cafeteria of the United Kingdom's agency in charge of nuclear waste.
Great.
It's printed out and it's there. It can also be shown on huge screens. The biggest one I've seen has been 6 foot high by 26 foot wide at the University of Illinois in Chicago, where with a click or with the same sort of gestures that I use on my phone, I can bring up any one of 100 different murals like this, and the people sitting in the audience in front of that big screen can also from their laptops add material. So this sort of thing, this sort of flexibility is already in advanced experimental stage.
With the nuclear waste thing, I remember reading about the difficulties of like the half-life of nuclear waste is like 10,000 years, isn't it? Which means that we haven't got any, if you go to linear A and linear B, some of the earliest types of text, we haven't got any system of language that understands beyond a few thousand years. So from what I've read around the conversations that people are having is, how do you make a sign that says don't touch this stuff? And that to me is fascinating, is like, do you embed that in genetics? And I guess that's what I mean about the silence and the space around it, is like, okay, can we say that language is genetics? Do you breed a creature that turns a certain color when it goes near nuclear waste? Because genetics is a system that has passed on a language. You know, the legacy of that is quite interesting. And then I guess that I know that's kind of far too broad a thing, but if you are trying to write a sentence that gets passed on to the same half-life of a nuclear reactor, then how on earth do we do that? And from what you must probably know a lot more about this than me, so I'm on dodgy ground here, but from what I read, it was like people were looking into kind of like the history of theology, is like, you know, some of the oldest systems that have been passed down patterns are ritual, as in, you know, and that there to me are all interesting canvases. But yeah, so I've gone off piste a bit.
I say, no, that was fantastic. I say, Mark, you have your hand up. However, Pip, if you're able to reply, depending on where you are, etc., it would be really nice to hear from you, because you work with archival things. So this is a long horizon, and obviously we're very concerned with this. But I'm wondering if you haven't stepped away just for a minute. Okay, I'll ping you again, Mark. And then we're going over to Raphael's.
Yeah, very quickly. I really just wanted to pull together some threads of things I saw in the comment. First of all, it was Mark Bernstein's comment about view specs. And I also picked up Brandel's comment about how text can sometimes privilege things. It's just, I really like the presentation. I like this idea of the diagramming. And it's just a reminder of us all to not be too mired in the physical print space. It's as natural to me to think in terms of a book, but the view specs aspect of this, and it's something I'm used to from using Mark's tools, is the ability to look at the same data in a number of different ways. Is one of the things that, because a lot of work needs to go into producing some of the wonderful user experiences we have and diagramming tools and things that we have, we often end up with a tool that makes broadly a form of diagram. And often what we need is a number of them, not necessarily perhaps as polished, but as different ways to put a lens onto the same underlying data. And I'll shut up there because I'm really pulling strands together.
I got a message. Yeah, I just wanted to say I got a message in writing here from Pip saying she's here but unable to join by audio, which I applaud her for, being the most textual person of all of us right now. What were you saying, Bob? Final few seconds before Raphael's presentation.
Oh, I was just going to respond to Mark and say that there are very good beginnings of taxonomies of different kinds, and what interests me is not the either or that often we go to, but one of the questions is, how do we put words and images and visual elements, that is shapes and arrows and so forth, together in the most effective way? That's the book that I wrote 20 years ago, and it certainly needs a great deal of additional experiment. For example, I've collected the arrows. Arrows are one of the most frequent elements in putting together words and visual elements. I've got over 100 meanings of arrows now, and I haven't published it because I'm not quite sure how or where one would publish something like that. But it begins to be a database of those kind of things, and I'd be interested in working with others who get interested in that sort of thing.
That sounds like a beautiful subgroup of text to discuss in depth. So over to Raphael.
Hi, I'm Raphael, and I'm the founder of Me, which is a platform used to organize information. But it's also more than a platform. It's also a tool, a library, and a methodology. So I just wanted to showcase our vision for the future of text today and how we fit in to the whole thinking behind text. I want to start with this quote by Richard Saul Wurman, that we only understand something relative to something we already understand. And I want to showcase the problems related to finding information, basically learning something new. So when we go about learning something new, we tend to either ask somebody that knows about that subject, we tend to look for information in different places. And one of those places is Google, obviously. We can also search for information using YouTube or Wikipedia or all these different platforms. And as we go about searching for information, we start to open more and more tabs. So if I want to find information about pixel art, I can type pixel art and I can start to filter these websites to see what is interesting. I can also go on YouTube and search for pixel art and then start filtering all of these contents related to and this is very troublesome because the problem is that everybody begins searching from scratch, starts from zero. So if I were to start searching about pixel art today, I would start from zero, and then tomorrow somebody else would start researching about pixel art, and they would also start from zero. The problem with that is that there's a lot of useless starting from scratch when we could basically benefit from the people that came before us, so that we have curated content. This is the things we find when we search for information. So if I were to find information related to pixel art, I can find text, image, video, music, all of these different media types. And the way we go about it is that we tend to think of it as modular pieces of information. So every one of these is a card, which is one unit, one media. And then if you think in the horizontal way, this is one trail, and the whole board is all of the content related to that topic. And then these cards are part of a card library with different templates based on media types or functionality. And from these card libraries, we start to build these boards where we can interact with the cards. So all of the cards, they have a front and a back. The front has the content and the back has the metadata. And then we can also go full screen with these cards. And we can also have a table of contents that you can navigate quickly between these cards. If you want to filter information based on content type or by date or by creation, any kind of filtering type, we will support on the navigation and filtering bar. And the card creation process is very straightforward. And then I'm going to jump to a quick demo to showcase how it works. So here I'm in the platform. I have already curated a board related to pixel art. I can navigate horizontally and vertically. So here I'm navigating between a trail, and I'm navigating between the trails and the contents of the trails. Here I can also click and jump to a specific trail. And once I get to a trail that I want, let's say if I want to know about what is pixel art, I have a card that is a link to a Wikipedia page. I have some examples here. I have a GIF. I have some articles that I'm able to access. I even have cards that are 3D objects that exist within one specific card. I can also have cards related to music. Here I have SoundCloud or even YouTube cards. And this is interesting because I'm able to curate the narrative. I'm able to organize the content based on the story I want to tell. And then from there, I can share this link to the board. And whenever somebody is going to learn about pixel art, they can start from a curated area of content that is organized based on their needs or based on difficulty level. And with this, I'm able to organize the whole web in one single place.
Thank you, Raphael. I have you all back here. Comments or questions, please? Mr. Bob Horn, and then Chris.
Well, this is very, very interesting, Raphael. And I want to say that, and I want to get together with you as well as the others. Something like 40 years ago, I developed something which we called information mapping, which was how to chunk information into small spaces. And I developed a company that taught technical writers in industry. We taught, in the 20 years that I ran the company, we taught 400,000 of them because the method was so important to them. So there is a whole taxonomy and structuring of the kind of cards that you're put together. The method that I've talked about, information mapping, was based on small chunks of information of different kinds. There's work that was, and there are 12 to 15 PhD dissertations that have been done on the work and so forth. So, and companies paid an awful lot of money over those 20 years to learn how to do it. So you're really onto something, and you can catch up with 40 years ago by talking with me, and I'll help you.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I just wanted to say as well, both Vint and Wendy Hall mentioned HyperCard, but it was only until later that I found out about HyperCard. And when I did find out about it, I was like, this was developed a long time ago, before I was born. So then it was nice to discover that and to get those references and to get those manuals and everything. But I'm happy that Ismail is here because the whole project is actually based on the work by Paul Otlet and Henry Lafontaine, and also Arthur Mee, which was an encyclopedist. So everything is based on information sciences and library sciences instead of some other starting points. So libraries are like the future for me.
I will say that the important thing for people is to structure the information, and that's what I'm offering to you. You don't have to use it, or somebody else will somewhere along the line. But
of course, no. I'd love to talk to you, Bob, about everything in the past, everything related to this is of interest, and living legends are amongst us. So I would love to catch up later, of course.
Chris, can we see your face or not? Oh my gosh, here he is. Wow.
Hello. So when I first started learning about hypertext, because I was at Southampton and everyone at lunch kept going on about it, and I read the the Vannevar Bush classic text that everyone shouted at me till I read some off, and I had a phrase in that about people browsing a network of information across lots of systems, and the trails do not fade. Like, yes, they do. We haven't done that bit yet. And we do get people who bought this product also bought this product, but we really don't get people who were researching this on Wikipedia or also looking at this, except in the context of trying to sell us things. So I'm really pleased that we're sort of starting to try and get some of this happening.
Thanks, Chris.
Just have to show proof to Fred I showed up.
Yeah. Talking of which, Brandel, I see you have your hand up, but Wendy, being my main supervisor, I will call on him. Oh, okay. Do you have any comments on this? Because I would love to hear from you. Oh, and you're muted. It's just like one of our supervisor meetings.
I'm doing my ref scoring while I'm listening. So if anyone knows about the Research Excellence Framework, what a nightmare I've lived this year. Anyway, I just couldn't. When I heard Raphael speak, like Vint, it was like, oh, this is a modern version of HyperCard. And there's nothing wrong with that, Raphael. Absolutely. It's exciting to see it. I'm and Chris talking about, as we may think, Chris is the paper, just so you couldn't, but I'm sure everyone knows that. The trails, we still don't really do what he talked about in that paper. And the thing for me is that these memes run through for years, before any of us were alive, people were talking about these things. We've had the privilege of having the technology to realize them. And that technology changes all the time. And as the technology matures and gets more sophisticated, we can build more mature, more sophisticated systems. But they're actually all built on the same principles. And I'm trying next year, I'll finish by saying, and I don't know who I'm going to work with to do this yet, but I've got this huge multimedia archive in Southampton of pictures of the systems we developed back in the 80s and 90s with HyperCard and Microcosm and then the web. And these, I want to be able to follow all these memes through to what's happening today, and you're what's happening today. So I hope you'll be in this book or whatever it is. I can't work out what I'm trying to do here, but I've got to do something to capture everything I did back then and relate it to what's happening now. I've talked to Vint about this, but I haven't worked out how I'm going to do it, but I will. And you guys I love the way you said my future is libraries. Libraries are a lot of our past as well. And it's like, I remember when Ted Nelson said to the web conference, your future is my past. And it's like, it's so important for me to follow these trails of endeavor. And if you've reinvented something, there's nothing bad about it. It means the first idea was a good one, but it was developed in a different time. I'll shut up, sorry.
Wendy, sorry, Brandel, just another second. Wendy, thank you for highlighting the importance of, well, for me, it's not just the future of text, it's also the current state of texts. Even researching the amazing work that you did as my supervisor at my university, Microcosm, there's the one book you guys made. There's not that much there, and it is crucial that we get what has been done and also what we are doing now to be recorded. So yeah, a perfect point. Thank you. Brandel, sorry about the going all over the place.
Not at all. I'm happy to cede the floor to the titans in the room. I love the work, and two things sort of jump out at me. And one is that some people do have this information already, in the sense that Google and others that are responsible for the routing and the navigation that people undertake over the internet do. And in fact, as I understand it, many times when people bounce back out of pages, then that's a black mark against the validity of that as a step along a trail. And so it is being sort of leveraged, but fairly opaquely, as I understand it, for the way that those trails are being currently made. I think that your call to render those things as more tangible as artifacts for people to be able to follow themselves is very apt, and it's something that I've played with in the past. And the question I have is, in terms of the authoring, what are the sort of mechanisms through which you make it easy, and how do you feel like that sort of impacts the number and the quality of the trails that sort of flow as a consequence?
Great question, Brandel. We tend to think of curation as three levels. In the first level, there's the personal curation, where you're able to compile your own point of view on that content. A second point of view would be specialists in that area. So somebody of reference, a professional, would be able to compile, and then obviously, influencers and all of those sorts would be able to share their point of view on it. And then the third point, which is where we'd love to reach someday, would be our personal curation as a platform, and that involves a little bit of every curation, because one of the issues that when we start to think about is that if a company that does pixel art, if they curate pixel art, they're going to curate it based on trying to have it more related to the work that they're doing. So if we have competing companies, then we're going to have, competing curations, and one will not talk about the other. And then what we'd love to do is to have curated boards where we contemplate pretty much every facet, both the pros and the cons, and the different ways of doing it as well. And the quick idea that I present is that if we talk about, for example, rice and beans, here in Brazil, we use rice and beans for a basic, lunch. But if we talk about rice and beans in Japan, they use it for pastries and sweets. It's not wrong to use rice and beans for pastries or, traditional meals. It's just completely different and completely ends of the spectrum. So we'd love to showcase, how we would go about presenting rice and beans in different cultures in different ways. In different points of view. We don't view things as right or wrong. We just present different points of view so that people can base their necessity on the information that they see.
Thanks, Raphael. We're now going to go to Dave LeBeau, who's going to do 5 minutes live. I will keep it to the time, but I just wanted to repeat in a different way what I said earlier about the chat. If you'd like to, there are some new people here, which is just truly wonderful. If you want to introduce yourself, please do so in the chat. This will go in the book, so it'll help us with our internal networking. If you want to write what you're doing or what you're interested in, that would be super lovely. This chat will not be thrown away. We also have the Google Doc, which we aren't using as much today, and I think that's fine. If you prefer to use the chat, it's really personal preference. So while Mr. LeBeau is getting ready, Mark has a comment or question.
It's a question. Are there 2 meetings tomorrow at 2 a.m. Pacific and another at 7, or did this one later get dropped?
There's always this one annoying person in these meetings who actually read the emails. It was supposed to be 2, but we've decided to cull it down to 1. So the one we're doing is going to be super early for you guys and a bit more reasonable for the rest of the world. So thanks for calling me out and actually having read things. It's the one that's 10 a.m. UK time, and the most recent email. Oh yeah, Vint, I see you have to go in a few moments, but as I try to do, try to thank you for your support. Thank you so very, very much. We will continue the dialogue after you drop off. There's 2 more presentations. One of them you know very well. It's mine. It's also David LeBeau's, which you can watch later at your leisure. But also we will be discussing more about where we go from here. And one of the things will be we're going to be upgrading our monthly meetings to have more structure. So we will make some kind of a journal. You will all be updated with the information about how that goes.
It's been I wanted to mention to everybody that while I was at the supercomputing conference, I played a 6-minute video that you prepared describing reader, author, and visual meta. That would be useful for everyone on this call to see if they haven't already seen it, or maybe you're going to show it anyway. But it was a very useful summary of the functionality that I think everyone would appreciate.
Thanks, Vint. That's very nice. That is indeed what I'll be showing after David's presentation, because otherwise I would waffle on forever. Took a while to get it to be 5 minutes. David, would you like to share screen or will you be talking? Oh, you're sharing screen. Excellent.
David, your mic is still muted.
Sorry about that. Normally this takes a good hour to present, so doing it in 5 minutes is a little bit of a challenge, but here goes. For the last 10 years, I've been working on a solution to a somewhat ubiquitous problem, which is how can an individual or a group of people combine pieces of information from multiple online sources to produce something of value, solve a complex problem, or generate new knowledge. And what we have developed is a social reading and multi-document sense-making platform called Highlighter. So the origins of Highlighter go back to when I was a graduate student trying to write my first paper in 1992. And I think everyone has some version of what you're seeing here as I'm trying to cope with all these snippets of information. How do they fit together and link to what I already know? So when I was invited to write an essay for the Future of Text and then got the book, I thought, oh, here's an opportunity to do sort of a crowdsourcing of a forecasting exercise. What does the future of text look like? And so what I did was, and so this would take much longer to actually illustrate everything, but essentially I imported the essays into Highlighter. I annotated the high value fragments, added comments, in some cases added excerpts from other documents. And then we do this thing where you move highlights into this application we call the HighBoard, hypertext clipboard, to create what's called a high trail, and then tag each highlight. So what that looks like is, sorry, I just opened the wrong, is, you capture some text, add a comment, and then if you did it with other people, you have this mapping where yellow is the logged in user, blue is other people, and green is overlap, and each section is related to a comment. And then what you can do is you go through, the 170 essays that I've marked up, add a set of tags, which turned out to be about 20 different tags, and then copy to the highboard. And you see how as I go down through the list, I can move things over to this other application. And in fact, if I want to, I can say copy all. So everything in a particular document moves over, and you have immediate links back to the exact location in the document where it came from. And so this is what I came up with, this list of tags, and then Highlighter has some sorting capabilities. So I arranged the list into an initial narrative structure. So there were comments about the purpose of the book, and then extended mind and text definition and evolution. And so all of these tagged, all of the highlights that had the same tags were grouped together and in this order that has sort of a narrative structure. And then what I did was, using Highlighter, I exported the contents and printed them. I had 600 snippets from the 170 essays, printed them out on heavy stock, cut them up into snippets, and then rearranged them into categories, which turned into 9 subtopics or chapter heads. And this became the structure of a narrative. So this relates back to Fabian and Raphael's work, which is, how do you take all this information and put it into a more memorable form? And so this becomes a narrative structure that looks like this. So over here on the right are 546 highlights arranged in an order with, sometimes I can add notes that aren't linked to a particular thing, headings, and then each of the fragments and the related comment in an order that makes sense and tells a story. And then just very quickly to finish up, I then went through, I imported the results, the content of the High Trail, and highlighted every key term that I thought would be of interest. And then I dropped the key terms into Google Scholar and other places and started collecting documents. Now, I now have over 5,000 documents, many of which are directly related to the future of text. And what I did was I printed out the entities, and I'm actually in the process now of arranging them into categories. And then just one more minute. And the idea is, looking at this screen, I'm talking to a variety of people. Some of you are on the call now, where an intelligent machine would make a model of the reasoning process of the assembler, that is me in this case, in creating the High Trail, where each of these highlights has coherence, one to the next, local coherence, and then the chapters give a kind of global coherence. The machine makes a model of that, points at my repository of 5,000 plus documents, and brings back not just relevant documents, but curated fragments with suggestions about what slot they go into. So the machine is essentially delivering the same thing that's over on this side, a search result that has immediate instant links to the location of curated fragments across all these documents with a suggestion, oh, this looks like it fits in slot 3 of 4. And then final slide, anyone that's interested in participating in a pilot study, we have a brand new version of Highlight. What I just was showing you is a prototype, or work with the data that has come out of the Future of Text project. Please get in touch with me as we're recruiting at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. And particularly printing it out just really illustrates the different kinds of technologies and not being prejudiced in one direction or another. If you can unshare screen, please, then I can more easily see who have comments. There's got to be comments and questions after that. I'm going to talk about Linnaeus until someone puts their hand up, and how he kind of invented the index card. Just to see this come back in such a way is just quite wonderfully fascinating. Luke.
Does your software have an API to get the links? The reason I'm asking is that makes it very helpful. We've got a little manifesto going to, actually it was in the Future of Text originally, the first volume or the last volume of the Future of Text. Yeah, I guess it was volume 1. I wrote with somebody else a manifesto for ubiquitous hyperlinking. So that's the question. Can I get the highlights via an API?
Yeah, so first of all, we have the ability to pass data back and forth between applications from highlighter out and then in. And we have something like, I think what you're talking about, every fragment and related comment you can create a two-way link to any other fragment, a comment in any other document in the set. And we're actually bringing in a kind of transclusion where you see the link, it'll say there's a link here, but when you mouse over it, it'll pop up that section of text. But as far as integrating with other applications, that's a big part of the architecture is designed for that kind of plasticity.
Mark, I have to apologize. I have skipped past you twice now because the yellowish hand is the same color as your window almost. So I haven't actually noticed your hand. Please.
Not to worry. I just really want to say a big thank to David, because one of the things that's sort of been discussion for the small group who've been doing the regular Future Text office hours. We've been talking about sort of ways to do some visualization of what is in the current corpus of Future of Text, and actually have talked about, well, how do we get some thematic mapping of what we have so far and what's arriving. And I've been conscious of you doing this. It's been really, really interesting to see what you've done, because I know it wasn't a small amount of work to get this far. And I think that'd be really interesting to take some of what you've done and use effectively, some of the topics and things you pull out as a means to do some thematic exploratory visualization as well. Just yet another way. I mean, because one of the ideas is, for instance, we have a very broad church here, all sorts of interests. So if, say, you come to the Future of Text and you're interested in, I don't know, typography or something, well, what else is there around there? It's one way of diving into a wide corpus to start with the things you're more familiar with, and it's somehow easy to get more traction that way often, and then you can spread out to other exciting stuff. But I just want to say, in a sense, thanks for what you've done, because I think it has a usefulness, even beyond what you've been doing, obviously with the development ongoing with your own tools. So that's super. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Randall.
This is really cool work. I've sort of dove in and looked at it last night as well. So some of the deeper dives that you mentioned, taking an hour for. I'm curious. It strikes me that some of the numbers that you were throwing out about that, the number of tags, the number of the number of cards and things like that, sort of strongly implies that there is an expected scale of data and sort of complexity of representation. Do you have any thoughts as to the way in which your system can be amenable to multiple layers of abstraction, levels of detail to be able to understand things from different sort of distances, as it were?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So a high trail is kind of a conversation. And so we have this idea of multiple conversations, and those conversations can exist at different levels in the system. You can also combine high trails, right? And actually somebody asked, well, how do you get to the unexpected? Well, you can also, with all of the different terminology that when you're doing this kind of work, you can look at homonyms and synonyms in different parts of speech and get the computer to go out and say, well, here's something that seems to be related to what you're working at some level of abstraction, but it's not in your core, it's not in your high trail. And then, so this really is partly a solution to, information overload and being able to tap into the ever-growing landscape of information. I wanted to mention one other just thing that I think is one of the more fascinating aspects in creating the high trail. Because of the immediacy of the response to the system, it really helps to induce the flow state. So I'm finding myself feeling like, wow, I'm just learning at a faster rate, or somehow the whole experience is more pleasant. I think what Highlighter is doing is combining deep reading when you're highlighting with the dopamine hit of surfing, which is when you're going down through the high trail and reviewing. And when you review, you're reviewing from multiple perspectives, sort of related to your question, at different levels of detail and abstraction. And if you let your curiosity go, you can just end up stumbling on all kinds of things that you would have never gotten to, but the system kind of facilitates serendipity. We call it a serendipity trapper, in fact.
Daniel.
Yes, thank you. Really fascinating stuff. I'm curious, in addition to high quality user interfaces like this and workflows, I'm curious as to how you represent this data in the back end and how you envision data interchange working, facilitating these kinds of things. How central or not is data interchange?
Oh yeah, no, so I'm not the right, from a technical standpoint, I'm not the guy to answer that question, but I can tell you that this is, the idea is to enable all types of files and all types of media to be brought into the system. We actually piloted marking up images, which is really fascinating when you think, and also video. So now that, one thing I didn't show you is that you can move, drag and drop the highlights within that column to different locations. And so it's almost like a film editing system to refine your narrative. And the secret sauce is that the user is engaging in kind of coherence monitoring. How much sense is this making? Am I telling the story I want to tell? From a global standpoint, have I covered everything? Do I have the right chapter headings? And then within each chapter are the pieces of information telling a story in a coherent fashion. And that might involve going to a video or to an image. And the whole idea is to be able to take in many different sources and not necessarily have access because of copyright and so forth, but you can have the snippet in there. And in some instances, you won't have the link back to its exact location. And that's okay too. It's just less context for you, right?
And to put a finer point on my question, how do you imagine multiplayer mode or interacting with other workflows?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, so this is the other fascinating thing. And some of this stuff emerged for me in using the system. People maybe are familiar with the concept of stigmergy, the idea that the structure provides all the information that participants need to know what to do next. So this comes from the study of insects, like how do termites build these colossal structures? Well, once you have the initial structure of the high trail, the chapters and some coherence in the slots, then anyone can come in and say, oh, I've got this little piece of information. It fits in slot 23, right? Because the structure is guiding that. So as far as we have not done, we're just starting to do some research on this idea of collaborative high trails and what that looks like when you bring, many people together to create that narrative structure. But you don't need a centralized authority because the high trail itself provides the information that people need to know what's relevant and where things fit within the emerging storyline.
Thank you very much, Dave. We've talked about this a lot in our weekly meetings, and to see it come together and for you to present it, that clearly was really, really nice. So we have one presentation left, and it's mine. After that, we'll discuss that as normal. And then, since we're already way over, which has never happened at a Future of Text, but I'm actually very pleased it did today. We took it a bit more casual. Nobody has to catch any taxis to get home, and people who can make it, and cannot. So after that, we will discuss a little bit how to continue the dialogue. But here I will share screen for the last time. I said in my introduction poem, we can write our way out. For those of you who don't know, that's a line from Hamilton. And for those of you who don't know, what in the world have you not seen Hamilton yet? It is a love story to the power of writing. It is the most incredible thing. And if you ever want to have coffee with me, that'll be at least half the discussion. Anyway, here's 5 minutes on visual meta and how it's implemented in reader and author. I'd like to show you the PDF viewer reader, followed by the authoring tool author. But first, I'd like to introduce you to visual meta, which is our approach for embedding metadata in PDF documents robustly and which author and reader supports. This is what paper meta looks like. In most books, on the first page, there's information about the book. This is metadata for PDF, not much metadata at all. So back to the metadata in the book. It's on the first page. So what we've done is essentially to take that kind of metadata and put it at the back of the document. In this case, visual meta appended to the ACM hypertext proceedings in a pilot. It's on a new page after the normal contents of the document. The formatting is inspired by the academic standard BibTeX, and this bit is actual BibTeX. There's much more visual meta can contain, which I can't go into today, but you can see more on our website. I'll put a link up at the end. I think it's really important to highlight that visual meta is appended to the back of the document visually. It's on the same level as the contents of the document. It's not in some external data resource. This means that a document with visual meta can even be printed and no metadata is lost. This is important since we expect these documents to be readable with full metadata in 1,000 years at least. Here's a core benefit, citing through just copy and paste. When I copy from reader and paste into author, the result is not plain text, it's a full citation. This is because the full visual meta was added to the copy text on the clipboard and author knows how to parse it, thus making it a citation, robustly with no manual work done to introduce errors. In author, I can use escape to go in and out of full screen. I have a focus mode which fades all text outside the paragraph with my cursor, and a bold view which fades everything which is not bold while also retaining the headings. To make a heading, a controlled click on the text I want to turn into a heading and choose the level of heading I want to assign. Here I can see the keyboard shortcuts, making them quick and easy to learn. With a real heading, not just big text, I can fold the document. I can also select text and do Command F for find to find all the occurrences of that text in the document. Then click on an occurrence to jump to it or Command F again to exit this view. Notice the headings also appear in this view as they do in the view of the named entities of the document. I can double click in the margin to write a note to myself. If I double click on this text, the result is a search in the document, same as Command F. If I need to add a note to a specific section, I can Command click on a heading. When I fold the document now, that section has an asterisk to remind me that there is a note there. To cite, I can quickly search for a book by its author or title. I can even take a picture of a page of a book I'm reading, copy the text from that picture in Photos and use that, since this searches for books by body text as well. Thank you, Google, for Google Books, and thank you, Apple, for live text. At the bottom of the screen, it says right/map. This allows me to toggle between the right and map views, or I can do Command M. The text here is the same text as in the right view. If I double click on any text, I perform a find command. The last thing I'd like to show you in author is augmenting how a student can define by writing to learn how the concepts they're dealing with fit together. All right, some of this work was inspired by the musical Hamilton. Select the text Hamilton and do Command D to define this concept, simply by writing, "It is a musical by Lin-Manuel Miranda." Then I'll save. Go to the map view again, double click on the screen and type Hamilton here as well. Notice that there are no lines connecting Hamilton to anything. Then I'll click on my name and a line to Hamilton appears. I Command D to see my definition and I can see that there is a sentence with Hamilton in it. When I click back out, I can see the sentence when I point to the line. When you click on Hamilton, there's no line going from Hamilton to my name because unfortunately the musical is entirely unaware of my existence, whereas I am a fan of the musical. Therefore, there is a line from me to the musical. The lines always appear when selecting a defined concept going outward to the text on the screen, which the definition contains. This helps the user develop a mental map, not just have a computer do it for them. So now I'll export to PDF, leaving all the options, including visual meta, of course, and open the document in Reader. So here we are back in Reader with a document we just authored, which has full visual meta. This means we can fold the document like we can do in Author, as well as find in the same way. You can even choose to see only names in the document. You You can click on a citation to get the reference information in a pop-up. The final thing I really want to show you today in our software is that the defined concepts are exported as glossary. Because of Visual Meta, this is an interactive glossary. As you saw earlier, if you select text in the document and do Command F, you get all the occurrences of that text. That text is a defined concept. In other words, it's in the glossary. You also get the definition at the top of the screen. Any other terms show up in bold, so you can click on them and navigate to them, same as following the lines in the map view in Author. Thank you. That was actually the video that Vint mentioned. I built that for his supercomputing and humanities presentation that he had earlier in the week. I'm going to put a timer on myself as well. Questions or comments, please. Starting with Wendy. Oh, Wendy, you're so muted.
Why start with me? I'm reading a ref impact case study. I was listening, Frode, but
I know, but
well, look, okay. I will say that I'll pick up what I really think I should be able to use Visual Meta to help me manage and write about my multimedia archive.
That would be wonderful. And one thing you said to me in one of our very first supervisor sessions was that you don't have time to write, which is completely understandable. What you'd like to do, and I think you used your hands, take something from Twitter and take something from here and kind of construct a document. I think that is very evocative. It's really helped my thinking. The notion of glossaries. At the beginning today, I mentioned how my father never used the word "you are wrong." He was very soft like that. He said, I would characterize it differently. And I said that a glossary is somebody's characterization of something. It's not a pretending of truth. So once we start being able to express in more hypertextual form, glossary is a hypertextual form in a way, right? Because it's small and it's inherently connected. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, can I just say two things? One, we were friends before I was your PhD supervisor, and I'll tell the world here, the first is easier than the second.
So we were friends, supervisor, and then that's decided what comes after that.
I'm having as little to do with his supervision as possible. But Dave's on the call, I think. That aside, you see, my history goes back to, I mean, my research, I'm a mathematician originally, but my computing research goes back when I started looking at Bush and Nelson and Doug, of course, mutually, we met, of course, with Doug. I have memories. I don't have a lot of recordings of that, but that's where, that's where my story starts. Then it goes into the multimedia, the hypercard, the microcosm years, and then, of course, the web and the distributed link service and the semantic web, and then web science and all the places I'm going today. And I've got an archive with all those stories in pictures, videos, slides, and my papers. And I want to tell that story with everything linked together and linking to other people's work, like the stuff we had from. Is that a Dave I see grinning there? You'll be in it. You'll be a star in this, Dave.
Wendy, what you need is generic links. So
funnily enough, I do need generic links. I do need generic links. I need microcosm, but I think I need Visual Meta. Oh.
I think you do, Wendy. Sam, I do see your hand. Not like Mark, where I couldn't see it, but the issue I think you want to bring up, Wendy, is addressability. And I am really, really pushing the issue of addressability. In the normal world, we can say, go down the road and take the second left. Hypertext links break. Citations are wonderful because they just give you a way to find something. Hey, this document was written by so-and-so at such a place. These things have not sufficiently been brought together, I think, yet. But if we have addressable spaces, then we can start doing exactly what you talked about, Wendy. And I know I'm preaching to not only the choir, but to the choir master on this.
Yeah, my problem is I don't have any. I have less time than anybody else other than Vint Cerf on the planet. Yes. So anyway, we'll see. Next year, I want next year to be the start of my doing this before I'm too old to do it. So.
And there are so many people here. We can all do it together. Raphael's got David LeBeau's got. Bob Horn's got, you know, and
You're
Sam.
going to help me conduct this choir, Frode?
Yes. Sam, I'm really intrigued on your perspective on this.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I think I was just looking at, it reminded me of, have you come across a book called The Elements of Typographic Style by Robert Bringhurst? So this thing in which we just kind of like, it's almost when we're at this point visually, we sort of forgetting like the relationship between an italic and a bold, and like I can read your presentation very clearly because we pop into bold and that's the thing that happens. But then it was also just responding to maybe what David and his cutting out of all of the text. It's just kind of that refresh that comes into that, and the relationship again of the page, as in like the page of dropping it into Adobe or a PDF reader and things like that. So I haven't got the. I'm still working out what this means, but it's just kind of like I think that the element of typography is so unconscious most of the time, and some of the and just kind of expanding that. I'm sorry for not fully articulating what's going on in my mind at the moment, but there's something there, Freddie, and I'll put it in an email. Sorry.
Sam, don't need to articulate questions, and vagueness is also very worthwhile. I'm going to segue now a little bit, the last 5 minutes of my little bit here, into highlighting what I really, really want. And what I really, really want joins in the last bit of this conversation, which is how to have our own conversation. I want to be able to produce a PDF like I will do of the book. The book will primarily be a PDF. I want you to be able to read that in any software you like, but obviously we are experimenting what we can do in Reader, which was updated literally 30 minutes ago, by the way. And you can do whatever you want. But the key thing is that, let's say someone, okay, like Wendy, one of the things you said that jury has been going on and on about, you think a link. It's so quotable, right? I want to make it, you said it at one of the
That was Dave first said that, I think.
Which Dave? Duror or Miller? Okay, great. So
I think he said that in the 90s.
Well, exactly. This is the point. So when someone cites that, obviously in academia, we all know about, following citations, and we all know about links. But if you have a PDF, a normal PDF, and I love PDF for the same reason that I used to hate it, it is a frozen artifact of something that was presented to the world. When you cite that, you should be able to not just you should be able to open the document that you cite. So the idea is that all the PDFs that you've gathered into your hard drive or whatever storage you have, if you have them, you shouldn't have to go to ACM Digital Library to download it by following a DOI again. It should find it on your system. So this is one of the things that Visual Meta tries to do. We have a notion of a VMID, and there are millions of kinds of IDs in the world, and it really doesn't matter. As long as they have a reasonable chance of being unique.
You see, what I want to do is when I talk about thinking links, I want to be able to someone to click on the link and go to Dave Duror giving a presentation about thinking links. Because he puts all his slides up on the web, all his talks up on the web. You must have done a talk with that in, Dave. And then the idea would be people keep adding to it. So it doesn't, It's not a static book about just my work. It's a book that everyone can add to, or a piece of work. Am I being too ambitious here?
No, if you have more time, Wendy, this is exactly what we talk about on our Monday and Friday talks.
I haven't, you know me, I don't.
No, I know. But just to say, that's exactly one of the main
But I'm very happy in the new year to be part of a workshop to discuss it.
Excellent. So I see David and Luke have their hands up, but just to explain, we've been talking about the notion of binding. For instance, we have the future of text 1, we have the future of text 2. Should we make it onto one book, or should we keep it 2? These are interesting questions. If you have a newsletter or a journal, should that magically be a document? And I'm going to refer to PDF, even though it's very old-fashioned. Should it keep growing? One of the other ideas, and so many people have reflected something related to it, is if you open up 20 or 20,000 PDFs of what is in some journal, you should be able to manipulate them and view them as one whole. So one of the fun little ideas we have, as I showed earlier, select text, do Command F to see all the occurrences. That's really useful in a book. Who else is talking about this specific text? It's very mechanical, it's simple. But what if you open all these documents, future of text 1, future of text 2, or newsletter, all that stuff that's related, you come across something, you select it, you do something like Command F, and then you hit Tab, and it does the same search in the next document. Right, so it's not fancy, but it is an interaction, and this is the kind of thing we're looking at, where what you're saying, Wendy, is, when we're talking about making a whole, what does that mean? What are the edges? Does the author or the reader make the edges? Very Ted Nelson, God the reader, God the author.
Everything's deeply intertwined, Frode.
It is. And over to David LeBeau. I had his hand up first.
Yeah, so just to mention sort of the elephant in the room, in going through the collection of essays, one of the things that emerged as an insight was you could call the book The Future of Text and Everything Else, because so much of the future of the whole planet is tied to text. And what I'm thinking of in particular is we're on the road to global ecocide, and we're having to learn to do transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research on a scale for purposes of sustainability and survival that human beings have never had to do before. And I'm wondering, Frode, it seems to me that you have the beginning of a cross-disciplinary glossary, so that if I'm reading something from a different field, I can see exemplars of that term as a concept in use in different concepts that are exemplars. So that, because I'm working with somebody that does workshops for NIH teams doing large-scale global transdisciplinary research, and the biggest problem is the language barriers, right? We don't do well with this kind of research, and there's something in what you're doing, I think, that could be developed into a solution to that really major problem, and it's a survival issue as well for the species.
Yeah, David, it is
one of the physicists one of the physicists at MIT has a taxonomy of the meanings of the word complexity. He has 50 meanings of the word complexity.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, so thanks both David and Bob. The point of this is actually the opposite. It is in honor of my father, who fortunately passed away during this work. It is, I hate this notion of truth. It is so tiring, right? And very few things are true. It's such a childish term, and it comes up again and again with connections. So yes, the whole notion of glossaries is to say, this is how I see it. So the reason we have developed it like this in author is for a student to present to a teacher. I constantly think of my teachers. When I write, this is something, and then I see the connections grow. That's really important. What you're talking about, David, is absolutely crucial. How we can provide the means when you're reading something by a specific author or in a specific field to see how it's connected. I see so much of that work going on with what different people are presenting today. So in going forward, one thing that the stake in the ground I'm holding is that so much software dies. Flash died, HyperCard can't be used, Microcosm isn't available outside a very specific setting that we have at Southampton. So that's why PDFs are so gosh darn important, because there's so many of them. I think that in a couple of 100 years, you'll be able to read PDFs. There'll always be a reader for it or print it out. So we got to develop ways where documents can become self-aware in the sense that they at least know who authored them and what the structure is, and they can communicate this. Dina Grieger, who was here earlier, when I talked to her earlier in the week, she said that what visual meta allows you to do is not just go from analog to digital, but to go from digital to analog and back. So, sorry, just trying to combine quite a few things. So we're way over time today, which is such a pleasure with these amazing people. So I think we should finish. But also Mondays and Fridays, 3 to 5 UK time, we meet and we hash out these issues and we try to build. As Mark Anderson put in the chat, there's been some great work by Adam Wern, who's also here, and Adam and Mark, on showing visualization trees. which is fantastically useful. So whoever wants to join in creating the means to have our own record or eat our own dog food, as some people say, it would be really, really lovely to have you. Just a quick one from Daniel and David, if there is anything quick from you, and then see if there's anyone else.
I mentioned in the comments, really appreciate the thought process on truth. I would consider it a continuously convergent ontological construct moderated by civilization.
What you said. Well, it's really interesting. I have a laboratory downstairs for the evolving human mind. My son Edgar, who's now 4.5, he's sitting downstairs for the second half of this meeting. He's been doing his homework, reading and writing as a 4.5-year-old. Education system here in Britain is not the same as it is in Norway. It's so much more advanced here. But to try to teach him some of these things, like for instance, today is Mufti Day. He could wear anything. Yesterday he was a bit concerned because he likes a lot of things. He likes pink. And he says, some people say that pink is just for boys. Exactly as you're saying, Daniel. That is true for some, not true for others. So to have it, to see this child growing is such a help to try to understand how we build our own knowledge bases for how to deal with our own thoughts. And on that note, some of you will join again in not too many hours tomorrow. I'll put that slide up for a few seconds, actually.
Road, it's Wendy. I can't join tomorrow, I'm afraid, but I really would like to talk to you about arranging if people are interested. I haven't got time to reply to everybody who said they want to help. I just haven't got time at the moment, but I'd happily work with Frode to arrange a sort of a longer one of his meetings to discuss.
Oh, Wendy, good point. And Barbara, are you still here? Barbara Tursky. Yes, you are here. Are you listening, or have I put you to sleep? I hope you're here. Okay, I'm hoping Barbara's coming to the mic. You see, Wendy, what we have decided to do, Alan Laidlaw, who couldn't be here today, annoyingly, he's been pushing something that Raphael has already started, which is the community. So what we're going to do is every month, we will have one organized day that'll be one topic. Barbara Tversky will be the first person to do that. I would be honored, Wendy, for you to do that. And it can either be talking about your work, your perspective, or you can set the agenda for anything else. But it will be part of our evolving journal. And that's why it's so important that we both record on video and we put it in a format that's usable. And there's so many of you here, you know you're going to be invited to please come and present, but also please join as often as you can. This thing we have every Monday and Friday, it's so casual. Come in late, come in early, doesn't matter. Come in one day, come in another, whatever you prefer.
How do we get in touch with others here on easily? We've been talking about nice glossaries and so forth. How do we get in touch with some of the people who've just talked? We've just talked with.
We have the Future of Text community on Circle. That's a place that we can get people together to share, and also to whoever is here. I'm going to put the link on the chat. We also have Twitter and Instagram that people can use to get connected with.
I'm not sure we're going to use Circle very much because it costs me $80 a month and it's not actually that useful. The key thing is the Monday and Friday 3 to 5 usually go a bit longer. Just come in. It's the same URL Zoom link as we use today. Again, I'll keep repeating how casual it is, whether you're there or not. It's no commitment. Also, if there is something you want me to send to the group, I try not to spam people, but I know I've been spamming you all quite a lot lately. Send it to me. I will send it out. But also, the book is done. You have a draft that you got a link to earlier today. There will be a few additions, including the transcript of today. We'll try to do it that way. Because it is kind of ridiculous how much similarity there is, David's work and Raphael's work and so on. It relates. It's absolutely not the same, but it relates. So we need to, learn better, right, from each other.
Well, if I wanted to get in touch with Raphael, how would I do it?
Oh, Raphael, you want to put your contacts in the chat?
Really easily, really quickly. Without, there are things like lists of people with their emails, for example.
Well, sorry, Raphael just put it in the chat. And I just want to say again, Some of you have already introduced yourself in the text chat. If anyone else wants to do it with their contacts, it's entirely up to how you feel. I will make it public. It'll be part of the book, and it will be part of the comment on the YouTube video. So that should absolutely be a quick way, Bob. And thank you for being pushy on that. It's good that we connect.
I also I have the list of the participants, and what I can do is I can probably make a Twitter thread with everybody that was present, so that you can have a single thread to at least reach out to them on Twitter, or some email or something like that. I'll put that together, Bob.
Excellent.
Where's the thread? Where's the thread?
The thread is in the chat on the side here. But please give me till Monday. I will be sending out a link to everyone where you will be able to get this information.
Okay, thank you.
I live in Wimbledon. My internet is not that great, ironically. Right, okay, well, thank you all. And I hope you have a good weekend, including the ones who hopefully will meet up tomorrow, 10 UK time. Thank you very, very much for today. It was wonderful, and I'll probably have a glass of some kind of bubbles. So I don't know, maybe even something interesting. Anyway, again, thank you, everyone. Bye for today.
Thanks,
Thank
Fred.
you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.